Ahoy and welcome back to the Turnaround. My name is Bob Gilbreth. You are in good company with fellow entrepreneurs and innovators who follow my stories from a career in tech startups and corporate innovation. Here to make you think, smile, and discover a shortcut to success or a trap to avoid. All right, this is one inspired by lots of things in the news lately that I just had to weigh in on with maybe an angle that no one's talking about, but should be, or at least you should be thinking about this as you look at how to fashion your career in the crazy times we have ahead. So this one's called Build Your Career with Turnarounds, a cyclical secret to success hiding in plain sight. The world's biggest brands can't get a break lately. Late last year, both Nike and Starbucks brought in new CEOs after experiencing declines in share price and product sales. Panera did the same thing in January. Intel did it in March. Subway followed in July. Target is the latest iconic brand to show its CEO the door. A move that was widely expected and likely overdue after losing customer, employee, and investor confidence through a series of miscues. While the challenges are massive, I would love to be one of these replacement CEOs. I mean, I would even take zero salary and only benefit from the stock upside. Why? Because turning around iconic brands almost always comes from simply running a playbook that has been used to perfection countless times in the history of business, government, and culture. I first got to learn and use this playbook when leading big brands at Procter & Gamble. Nothing is stopping you too from doing the same. Here's how. All right, first of all, let's get into why legacy brands go wrong. We may know great brands are built when some entrepreneur does something really right. This leader taps into an unmet need and through courage, hard work, intelligence, and lots of luck, hits on something that goes from 0 to 1 to billions and billions served. By creating or winning over a category, this business secures loyalty from customers, employees, and investors. There's a kind of positive inertia that kicks in, and the train of success keeps on a-rolling, even after the founder hands the reins over to a successor. Market tastes change and competitors work to break in, but the power of these brands provides an unfair advantage. But eventually, all good things come to an end. Sales growth stalls, then falls into negative territory. Big contracts are lost. Top employees leave while others are riffed. Earnings estimates are missed. The share price drops, and investors no longer believe the CEO's promises. Study the examples I mentioned above and many others, and you'll find a common element. The non-founder CEO lost focus on the core business that made it successful. Instead of minding the shop, their minds wander to things like the global conference circuit, where they pontificate at Davos for weeks about the state of the economy, to making mergers and acquisitions that seem sexy and get them in the news, but are off strategy, expensive, and distracting. Or they push needless, flawed product upgrades. Sonos, anyone? Others micromanage their employees and stay busy on the small stuff that they really don't understand. Others micro-optimize their compensation packages by pulling forward quarterly sales and playing other games to hit short-term goals. Finally, way too many, one is too many, are busy juggling affairs with their employees. All these human weaknesses are usually the result of some combination of fear and a big, bottomless ego hole to be filled. Plus, the absolute power that corrupts absolutely. A successful brand, business, or even a country, what country could I be referring to? Can run itself for a while, even with these distractions. That's because the stakeholders and the shareholders involved are stuck in their habits. Customers don't want to have to invest the energy to find an alternative. Employees don't want to invest the energy into finding a new job, and they don't want to have to say goodbye to their work friends. Investors don't want to have to sell their positions, take the tax hit, and figure out where to put the money instead. But disappointment after disappointment, and person by person, eventually the market adjusts. People go elsewhere. Usually there's some kind of tipping point that captures the greater public awareness. Like last week, when Cracker Barrel changed its logo to something that not only shredded brand heritage and differentiation, but also replaced it with something boringly bland and corporate. Customers were already feeling its quality decline, and this big public move was just the final straw. It's no surprise, though, that this comes from an outsider CEO. And, seriously, is there any decision more awfully cliche than changing the logo? Wait to change the logo until you fix all the other stuff, okay? All right. Eventually, because of all that stuff, the brands hit rock bottom and reach a moment of crisis that can be a fantastic opportunity. The CEO is fired and takes the blame with them. This scapegoat model of group catharsis is a recurring phenomenon in human societies dating back to, well, the domestication of goats. The new leader comes in and gets to hit the reset button. Employees and investors are desperate for change, so no longer slow the process with bureaucracy and meddling. Conscious attention, or focus, returns. Almost always, the playbook points to getting back to the basics. The stuff that made this a product or service that people loved all along. Why do I blame the leader, usually the CEO? Because they ultimately have responsibility for the business. They're also the farthest away from making the product or serving the customer, which means all they have to do is ensure the ship is heading in the right direction. That's the job. An internal candidate is often best for this job. They bring a combination of institutional memory, years of dedication, and the trust of employees. They are also fighting for a cause that is bigger than their paycheck or title. This is usually much better than a hired gun from the outside, who not only lacks the internal candidate's strengths, but is always kind of looking for their next gig, especially in case the going gets too tough. Long-lived brands either find these phoenix leaders or they perish forever. When they figure it out, many of the employees, customers, and investors come running back. And if the brand rises again, and then the brand rises again, until its most recent CEO gets distracted again, rinse and repeat. Just like that big company that makes shampoo. That's right. Once again, I'm talking about my time early in my marketing career at Procter & Gamble, also known as P&G, which I began at a business school in the late 90s. P&G is a house of brands that you know and love, including Tide, Crest, Olay, Pampers, Pantene, Febreze, Old Spice, and many more. Most decision-making on these brands is pushed down to individual brand managers, marketing directors, and general managers. And these leaders switch roles every few years as they climb the corporate ladder. But not all of these brands are always at the top of their game. From time to time, they slip. A competitor beats them to market with an innovation. A key retailer relationship goes wrong. The price-value equation gets out of alignment. Or the newest TV campaign lands with a thud. And often, one or more of these leaders under whose watch this happens does not make it to the next rung of the ladder. But one of P&G's core strategies is to stack talent like cordwood. So there's always fresh internal candidates standing by. When times of trouble hit one of these brands, they go through the reset process described above, almost always going back to what has worked before. Retail relationships are mended, pricing is adjusted, and a new TV campaign hits the air. I recall someone early in my tenure pulling me aside to point out that this was happening regularly across the company in business units worldwide. Brilliant career strategists sought these turnaround opportunities and shied away from established brands at the top of their game. I remember a comment like, "Oh, Pampers just lost distribution at Costco. Man, I'd love to work on that brand now. All you have to do is fix that and you're a hero." On very, very rare occasions, the entire house of brands at P&G is threatened by a weak leader. This last happened during my first year at the company. The new CEO, Dirk Jager, came into the job with the intention of remaking the entire company. He looked at the soaring stock prices and leaner teams at tech companies and got envious. This was during the tech bubble of the late 90s, of course. Jager launched a 6-year plan called Organization 2005 to both accelerate innovation and reduce costs. He promised faster growth to Wall Street and personally chose to launch what ended up being dubious new products. That list of dubious new products included Fit Fruit and Vegetable Wash, a natural soap for your produce, which happened to be my first brand assignment. As the junior person on the brand, I had a front row seat to seeing the higher-ups greenlight this launch under the pressure of Jager to grow at all costs. It failed just a few months after its launch. Jager tried to cut costs with off-the-wall ideas too. For example, he decided to create an airline dubbed Imagine Air because there were numerous flights between the US and Europe, and Delton wouldn't offer a discount. The plane had to stop for hours in Iceland to refuel. Eventually, as lifetime employees saw the stock they held for retirement cut in half within weeks, Jager became the first CEO in the company's 168-year history to be fired. A.G. Lafley, a longtime internal leader, was picked to replace him. As Roger Martin reminds us just this week in his email, AG stopped promising accelerated growth to investors and got back to basics. He cut ill-advised innovation and fixed the handful of big legacy brands that represented the company's core. Several P&G alumni took the turnaround strategy to new jobs when they left the company. Brian Nichol has done this at Pizza Hut during a recession he joined, Taco Bell joining when the company was purchasing poor quality meat, Chipotle after it lost focus, and now he's attempting to do it once again at Starbucks. His Back to Starbucks plan is straight out of the P&G playbook. The initiative aims to simplify the menu, provide faster service, reestablish stores as community coffee house, and foster better relationships with store staff. On a side note, here's a plug for several of these employees who have gone to my friend Leonora Polonsky. She was a master brand builder at P&G who also left, and instead of turning around other brands, she opened up a strategic consultancy in 2008. And she's been helping a lot of these folks turn their brands around, often by getting back to basics. And this post, in part, was inspired by her posts on LinkedIn about Target and Cracker Barrel, and I've got links here to go check that out. The art of the turnaround, though, goes far beyond P&G and its alumni network, of course. Ed Catmull turned around Disney Animation. Satya Nadella got Microsoft back on track, and Steve Jobs' return to Apple is a classic example. I also had the opportunity to practice this when I became the CEO of my last startup, Ahology. I was the second banana to my co-founder and CEO. As the person closer to the realities of the marketplace, I strongly felt that we needed to pivot the business and become profitable. The company was dying, and I was ready to resign. But my executive team got behind me and convinced me to fight for what was needed. Things played out, and my co-founder stepped aside. My investors helped make it happen and then got out of the way. I landed the CEO role on an interim basis, and despite looking at upcoming layoffs and long odds to turn it around, that first day back in the office, I felt like the clouds parted and the sun was shining down on me. I could stop wrestling with my co-founder and focus on figuring out how to survive. This significant change had a positive impact on the company, enabling us to take drastic action to find product market fit and profitability. Long story short, we made a big pivot, got profitable, and were acquired by a strategic buyer for a premium price. Without the clarity of our crisis, our team coming together, we would have become another forgotten, failed startup. Being a turnaround leader is pretty awesome on your resume and personal brand. And it's not bullshit, it's needed. There are great brands out there, managed by employees who care, that need this refocus. The only tragedy is that it takes weak leaders and the harm they leave in their wake to see the value of the good ones. The meta lesson here is in recognizing this as one of the many patterns of the complex adaptive system of organizations and markets and our lives. These patterns reflect archetypes that have been present throughout human history, recurring themes in our stories. Here, Carl Jung would likely cite the example of the phoenix, the mythological creature in many cultures that goes through a recurring process. It lives, burns out, and is reborn from its ashes. That's how it lives. Companies, too, burn out eventually through their leaders' failures. This burning is necessary to eject that leader from the system, much like a fever in our bodies burns out a pathogen. Once that leader and all the other distractions are burned away, the business can be reborn. And, like Jung's phoenix, it instinctively returns to what made it successful in the first place, in a way that becomes consciously noticed and appreciated as it never was before. However, almost no one recognizes these patterns. These secrets are only visible when we have intent to learn. In other words, curiosity. And when we can manage to turn down the ego forces that blind us, like fear and attachments. This is called being conscious. Once you ladder up and notice the pattern, we can more clearly identify when and where we have an opportunity to deliver needed change, whether as the internal CEO replacement, a general manager of a business unit, or PM on a tech team. Or we may see when it's time to get the fuck out if it's a hopeless cause. This pattern and opportunity are typical in any organization, including cities, neighborhoods, and governments. A few years after my move to P&G, my city of Cincinnati suffered through riots downtown. This crisis sparked the creation of 3CDC, an innovative public-private partnership that has transformed our neighborhoods in many positive ways. We're currently witnessing a success and progress in Argentina, where President Xavier Milei, I gotta look that up, is implementing much-needed radical changes. In a recent post, Neil Ferguson has a great quote: "The prerequisite for an economic miracle is an economic disaster." Turnarounds happen in technology, where the hype cycle is a recurring pattern. Today, several universities are undergoing much-needed reforms after losing trust from many groups. You can also see the pattern in media, sports, and fashion. And they happen in our personal lives too. We can become complacent or arrogant. We may lose focus on what matters most by seeking money or titles instead of purpose and impact. Or we follow what others desire instead of finding our own path. And we become bored or distracted, sticking with what's easy when we should challenge ourselves to keep growing. Just last week, I spoke with an old friend who was forced to spend time resetting after cancer treatment. The time off and brush with death allowed him to find a new career path, and he has never been more energized. Another friend recently hit a wall when the sale of his company fell through at the last minute. The resulting soul-searching led him to see the opportunity to hand over more responsibilities to his executive team. Today, his business is setting new records, and he is spending his time growing the company through innovative ideas that get him more excited. Often, when we hit rock bottom in a personal crisis, our internal CEO, the ego, finally resigns. We now have the freedom to recreate ourselves. The change we make involves reconnecting with our true self, which we lost sight of in our journey. But it's never too late to discover who we really are and uncover the potential within us. All right. Hey, how we might work together. Fleet is our holding company for services businesses. We invest in leaders ready to start their own company. If that's you want to be the phoenix arising from the ashes, or if you have any M&A you want to talk about, just hit my office hours link and we'll have a great talk, I'm sure. A2 Influence is our content development agency, which helps some of the biggest brands and retailers create and distribute authentic content at scale. Revelin is our consulting practice that helps with revenue alignment, growth management, and other RevOps functions. And as always, please do feel free to schedule a chat with my open office hours. See that link here. We can discuss questions, feedback, networking, really any topic on your mind. It's a highlight of my week to have these conversations with old friends and new friends. And then finally, the bonus content of the week, a little something I found meaningful. Everyone who has gone through one of these processes of turning a crisis into an opportunity has like a different phrase that they use to capture the magic of the process. The words I came up with years ago is I call it the challenge dividend. It's like the payoff from having a challenge. Ryan Holiday calls it the obstacle is the way. Another great one from Naval is, he says, your real resume is just a catalog of all your suffering. This week, I came across another one. This is from Michael Caine, the actor, who uses the phrase, use the difficulty. And he shares in this short video here about early in his career, a more experienced actor told him to turn any problem into part of the scene. Check it out.
Use the difficulty.
What does that mean?
Well, I got it from, I was rehearsing a play when I was a very young actor. And I had to come in this scene. It was a stage play. I'm behind the flats, waiting to open the door. There was an improvised scene between a husband and wife going on inside. And then they got carried away and they started throwing things. And he threw a chair and it lodged in the doorway. And I went to open the door and I just got my head round. And I said, I'm sorry, sir, I can't get in. He said, what do you mean? He said, there's a chair there. He said to me, use the difficulty. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, if it's a comedy, fall over it. If it's a drama, pick it up and smash it. He said, use the difficulty. Now, I took that into my own life. You ask my children. They said, directly, anything bad happens, they go, we've got to use the difficulty. How can we work? What can we get out of this? There's never anything so bad that you cannot use that difficulty. If you can use it 0.25% to your advantage, you're ahead. You didn't let it get you down, you know? That's my philosophy. Use the difficulty. Also, added philosophy is avoid them if you can.
So, that's it for this week. Thanks for joining. Whether it's challenge dividend, obstacle is the way, or use the difficulty, here's hoping that you get the most out of your crisis ahead. And thank you very much for joining me. Ahoy for now.